Fruity Knitting. This is episode 76. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Andrea.
If you're a new viewer, or if maybe you just don't know, we are an Australian couple and we live in Offenbach, which is just near Frankfurt in Germany. And I have to say, we've had some stunning summery weather lately. We had the Easter weekend last weekend and the temperatures were around 20 degrees Celsius, which is 70 degrees Fahrenheit for our American viewers. It has cooled down a little bit and we've had a little bit of rain again, but we've still got a great program coming up for you today. Andrea, tell us who is on the show.
Well, our main feature interview guest is Jillian Moreno, who many of you will recognise as being a regular contributor to the Mason-Dixon knitting site. And Jillian has expertise in spinning, designing, teaching and editing. And she's also the author of the spinning book Yarnitecture. So if you want to understand your yarn better, for example, how it's constructed or how to pick the very best yarn for any particular project, or even how much twist different fibres need to behave well in a yarn, or how many plies to look for in a yarn when you've got a particular project in mind. If any of these things interest you, you are going to love this interview because we cover all of these topics and much more. Jillian is very passionate about the topic of yarn construction. It's a two-part interview and we really delve in deep.
Yep, we're also featuring the up-and-coming Polish designer Asia Yarnitecture in Knitters of the World. We're going to be showing off some great projects from our 3 cows that we've got running at the moment. And we've also got 4 more vendor interviews from the Edinburgh Yarn Festival that we attended in March. That's all coming up, but right now we're starting with Bring and Brag because Andrea is dying to show off her latest finished project.
So I am totally thrilled. This is my Sculpted Frost by Linda Marving. Last episode I just started a sleeve and now it's all finished and blocked already. I'm super thrilled with it. Do you like it?
Do I believe you?
Yeah, do you like it?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's beautiful.
Do you like the colour on me?
Yes, of course. It's perfect.
Thank you. I'm thrilled with it. So for new viewers, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview. The yarn that I used is the Pels Wool yarn, which is called Tinder. It's a light DK weight yarn and it's spun by the Norwegian woolen mill Hillersvåg. And Pels Wool translates as pelt sheep, which is a Norwegian breed of sheep. And it's a cross between the Gotland and the old Norwegian short-tailed landrace. And it's
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. It's a 2-ply woolen spun yarn, and 2-ply is fantastic for lace, for a lace pattern. And later on in our interview with Jillian Moreno, she's going to tell you why, because she also tells you what plies are really good for what stitch patterns. Right now, I'm just telling you that it is. I didn't know that though when I chose.
You were just lucky.
Yeah, I didn't know 2-ply was particularly good for lace when I chose the yarn.
It would have been awkward to be explaining that you'd got the wrong ply just before having the expert on.
A very happy coincidence.
Yeah.
So the fleece of the Pels Wool is a natural shade of light grey, and when you dye over it, you get this really lovely heathered effect. And when you knit it up, you get a very soft halo. Or fuzz. Fuzz is another word for halo, but you don't confuse that with peeling. It doesn't peel. It's just a very soft look. Mm-hmm. And I like that because I didn't want a really crispy lace pattern. I didn't want it to be very highly defined. I wanted a more casual look, and I think it's just given me exactly what I wanted. Yeah. Which is great, even though it's not the recommended yarn.
Yeah, I think it's a great result. The way the lace works in that yarn, I think is really good.
Yeah. So the main challenge for me with this pattern was making sure I got all of my calculations right. And the pattern gives you 2 gauges to work with, a stocking stitch gauge, and because you've got stocking stitch panels down here and on the sleeve, and a lace pattern gauge. So when I'm using a different yarn to the recommended yarn, what I do is swatch in stocking stitch until I get the fabric that I'm really happy with. And then I compare that gauge with the patterns gauge and I rework the maths if necessary. And the patterns gauge is 20 stitches and 28 rows in stocking stitch, and my gauge was 23 stitches and 33 rows in stocking stitch. That mightn't sound like a big difference, but it actually really is, particularly if you have a tailored fit. It'll make a big difference to the overall fit of the garment. If you compare that, if you spread those numbers over the full width and the full length of the garment. So it really is important to swatch properly. The two alterations that I made were, I made it longer, so mine goes down to, say, lower hip, and the original pattern is probably about 10 centimetres lower than that. And I also changed the cuffs. So if you have a look at the original pattern, Linda has made this design to be very glamorous and elegant with very dramatic cuffs. So she's got 5 tucks and a little pearl ridge, and then she's decreased rapidly so that the sleeve is fitting very snug against the wrist, and that really emphasizes the dramatic cuffs. Now, I just wanted a more casual look, so I've only got 3 tucks, and I left out the pearl ridge, and I didn't decrease so dramatically, so my silhouette of my sleeve is just more gradual, and that gives me a more casual look, which I really like. Yeah. So Linda combines a lot of original little details in her patterns, which makes her patterns very individual, and I really appreciate that. One of the things I really loved was this tuck here it is here, that goes all the way up and around. It was fun to do it. I'd never done that before, and I think it just gives it that extra tailored look.
Yep.
It's just something that stands out as being, oh, I haven't seen that before, or that's unusual.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
But it also fits into the flow of the garment.
Totally. But I just love designs that look a little bit different in some way, and she does that. And her patterns I can highly recommend. There's a lot of detail, very well written. So that's great. Very, very happy with it. Now, last episode I did talk about the possibility of giving this garment away to a family member, and that would be either my daughter Madeline or my younger sister Fiona. Well, my mum checks in occasionally and watches an episode, and she did that on the last episode, so now she's put her hand up as well for this design. But I don't want to give it away. I'm now in a position where I really don't want to give it away. So I thought what I'll do is I'll wear it for a season at least, and then I'll reconsider giving it away.
Yeah, well, keeping it yourself is probably the safest option as opposed to giving it to one of the 3 bidders.
Well, I want to make sure it's going to be worn all the time, and I just like it. And as I've told you before, and whenever I knit something, I wear it every day for 6 weeks almost.
Yep.
Anyway, it's your turn.
So I'll give you an update on my current project, which is still under construction. I'm knitting this Intarsia design by Martin Story for our niece Simba. It is very much stocking stitch up to now, which is really great for me because it's very relaxing knitting. In the last episode, I showed you the back, which I had finished then. There's one great massive stocking stitch. That's great knitting for a child, though, I've got to say. Here's one sleeve that I've finished since then, so that's looking really good. Bit of shaping here, which I was very proud of, doing that. And
the set-in sleeve.
That's right,
yes.
Set-in sleeve, yeah.
And a little bit of a chocolate stain on the back, dark
yummy,
chocolate.
Yeah, I'm guilty. Yummy chocolate.
Was that with ginger or chili?
No. Like it's just a nice 85% Lindt chocolate.
Okay.
And I'm about halfway through the second sleeve, so that's coming along. So that's what I'm doing. The main feature of this jumper is, of course, the Intarsia, beautiful Intarsia design of the tiger, which comes on the front of the sweater. And Andrea, I'm a little bit concerned about that, and I'm thinking either I do it under very close supervision because I haven't done a lot of Intarsia. I haven't done any real Intarsia.
We do want the tiger's face to look very beautiful.
Yes, so we don't want any puckering because, it's got to be very even, no puckering. And, so I'm thinking maybe you're going to step in there and either supervise closely or maybe I might delegate to you. Because, we want a beautiful, healthy-looking tiger in the end product. We don't sort of want a wrinkly tiger.
We don't want a cross face because he's all puckered.
Yeah. So,
there is also the problem that the floats.
So the contrast colour is really dark, and this is a 50% wool and 50% cotton yarn. I'm not sure whether that's it's not the recommended yarn, but I'm not sure exactly how different it is. But my concern is that it's not a fluffy yarn, and so if there is any puckering or with the Intarsia work, that the floats will show through to the front, and that wouldn't be so good either. So that's something we have to watch out for.
It's a sandness, Norwegian yarn sandness.
Yeah, but I'm doing a great job on the stocking stitch, and I'm looking forward to practicing my back stitch because I did get my qualification.
Yes, you're a
on back
master
stitching.
stocking stitcher
So
and a qualified back stitcher.
That's right. So I'll be putting it all together, and hopefully you'll have a beautiful tiger's face to see in the next episode.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. Coming up right now is part one of our interview with yarn expert Jillian Moreno. There's a heap to learn here about...
Not Gillian Moreno, Jillian Moreno.
I actually thought she might have made that name up. But it's very close, Moreno. So she has got a heap to say about yarns. I think it's really fascinating, and I think it's good background knowledge for knitters.
Yes.
So it's coming up right now. Enjoy it, and we'll see you very soon.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. Today's guest, Gillian Moreno, spins, designs, teaches, writes and edits. Gillian is one of the co-authors of the book Big Girl Knits, and she's also written the best-selling spinning book Yarnitecture, A Knitter's Guide to Spinning. Gillian's very passionate about teaching knitters to understand how yarn is constructed, because once you understand some basic principles of yarn construction, you'll have much more success in picking the best type of yarn for your project, or if you're a spinner, in designing a perfect yarn for your project. And of course, as a byproduct of this extra knowledge, your love affair with fibre and yarn will really deepen. Today, Gillian is joining us to talk about some of the more elusive topics like plying and grist and even finishing a yarn. So, Gillian, it's fantastic to have you with us, and thank you so much.
Sure, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, look, can we start with a very brief introductory summary of your background and what you're currently doing, and also tell us what Yarnitecture means?
Sure. I have been in the fiber industry for about 25 years. I worked at Interweave Press for a while, for about 10 years. I was there and part of the team that started Interweave Knits. And I worked with Judith Durant and Ann Budd. I did a book with Meg Swanson, with Alice Starmore. I worked with some really wonderful people and really immersed myself in the fiber arts world. And then I decided to have children and branch off on my own, and I started knitting and spinning, and now I work for Knitty.com as their spinning editor. I work for Plying magazine. I've written the book Yarnitecture, and I teach all over North America so far, and I'm really excited about yarn and yarn construction and how it affects a finished cloth. Yarnitecture is the idea that there are different components that make up a yarn. Fiber, the fiber preparation, how a fiber is drafted into a yarn, how it's plied, and how it's finished. And all of those things really inform your finished yarn and your finished knitted or woven or crocheted cloth in the end. So it's really fascinating to me to pick through that with people and watch them have the aha moments as to why their knitting has worked out really well, or maybe to address some of the problems that they've had in their knitting.
Just quickly, I want you to talk about some of the more subtle differences between commercially spun yarns and hand-spun yarns, because apart from being a really great knitter and designer, you're also a very passionate spinner. So from a spinner and a knitter's perspective, just talk about some of those subtle differences.
The subtle differences, sometimes they're not so subtle. Commercial yarn is made by a machine, and the entire time it's held under a lot of tension. And when you spin a yarn yourself, it has a whole different quality. Sometimes commercial yarns can seem kind of lifeless. To me, hand-spun yarn is really vibrant, and every spinner spins a different yarn. Sometimes we call it our Zen yarn or a default yarn. We can do all kinds of yarns, but we usually have one yarn that we really love, and it's like our spinning signature. Everybody's yarn is a little different, and as a spinner you can tweak each little bit of the yarn, how the color lays out. Is it fuzzy? Is it light? Is it durable? Do I have more stitch definition in this yarn, or do I want it to be fuzzy and blendy?
Okay, cool. Just before we get on to more of the technical information, I remember back in the early 70s when I was about 8 or 9, both my mother and my grandmother spinning, and they would always use, or they would only ever use, the raw greasy fleece to spin with, and they would wash that and card it themselves. Mm-hmm. So can you just give us a bit of a summary of how the spinning world has changed, say, over the last 20 or 30 years?
It has changed a lot. It's changed every bit as much as the knitting world and maybe more. It used to be that spinners would only spin from the fleece, and the fleeces weren't always necessarily great. You would go to a farm and you would buy a fleece. Usually the sheep were raised for meat or milk, and so the fleeces weren't really taken care of. As time went on and spinners got pickier and more knowledgeable, shepherds started raising sheep just for their fiber. So the fleeces got better. They bred for finer and softer fibers. And then people started dyeing. And the explosion in color happened in spinning as much as it did in knitting, with hand dyers and a lot more commercially prepared fibers available. So you didn't have to work from the fleece. You could buy it all ready to spin, didn't have to wash anything. And then, you had the bonus of a dyer who was an expert in color, making it some really beautiful colors for you to spin. So it's really, really changed in the past several decades for the better.
Yeah, and the hand dyeing, the availability of hand dyeing fleeces, that's really only been in the last 10, 15 years or so, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the availability of commercial fibers that are different breeds. It used to be just, the label would say 100% wool, much like yarn in a yarn store. Now you can get BFL, you can get Columbia, just like you can in a yarn store. The awareness has really shifted to breeds and variety, and that spinners and knitters want more.
So I imagine in the early days, my grandmother would have been just spinning on a long wool of some sort.
Or a merino.
My vague memories are curly locked fleeces that were long, so it must have been some form of a long wool sheep. Even though we were...
Did it look like my hair?
Yeah.
Yes, and it was probably a Wensleydale or a Teeswater. Both of those are long and lustrous fibers.
I remember as a child being totally jealous and pinning the locks on my own hair. Okay, but we'll get on. I'd like you to talk now about some of the uncommon fibres, because we have already had quite a few guests on the show, and a few of them have been real experts on wool in particular. Like we've had Deb Robson, who is the author of the Fleece and Fibre source book, and we've also had Kate Larson, who edits a spin-off magazine, and you are also an expert on wool, and wool, you've told me, is your favourite fibre to work with. But you also know a lot about a variety of different fibres. So I thought we'd just take the opportunity for you to tell us more about some of the uncommon fibres that you can spin with and how they behave and what to look out for, so we can compare them with wool.
Okay, I've got a little bowl here full of some fun fibres. I brought merino as sort of a baseline wool. This is what merino looks like. It's fine and it's crimpy. It's an elastic wool, and as you know, as knitters, it's very, very soft. And this is what it looks like in yarn. And it's elastic. That's a big thing compared to some of the other fibers I'm going to show you. I have Angora, which is from a rabbit, Angora rabbit. If a fiber is from an Angora goat, that's mohair. Angora is soft and fluffy. It's really light. And sometimes, as you know, when you knit with it, it flies all over the place. It's like fiber confetti. It's very short and slippery. So when you spin it, you have to put a pretty tight twist in it so it all holds together. It's warmer than It's warmer than wool, so it's used sparingly, usually as a blend in spinning. And the yarn is very, very fuzzy, and it's not as elastic as wool, but it blends well with wool. A thing about Angora is that it knits bigger than the yarn looks. It's like knitting with a mohair yarn. You have to leave space for the fuzz to fuzz, because that's the point of Angora.
And what percentage would you say is a good blend with wool?
Of Angora?
Yeah.
10% usually, or even less. It will still, even at 5%, you'll get a lovely halo and lightness and silkiness to your yarn with Angora.
I suppose it dyes up really well too, does it? Does it give you a shine when it dyes, or a fuzz?
It does. It's a little bit shiny, especially compared to merino, which is absolutely matte. It has more shine than merino. So it gives you flecks of shine and that soft halo. Then I have camel, which is a new favorite of mine. This is camel down, baby camel down, about the softest you can get. And this is from a 2-humped camel. Those are the ones that give us fiber. And it's the undercoat that keeps them warm in desert nights that you spin. It's very soft, lofty, absolutely matte, but this gorgeous color of brown. Again, it's warmer than wool. It has a tiny bit of elasticity, but not a lot. Again, a great blend with wool, though you can get 100% camel yarns and you can spin 100% camel yarns. It may be too hot for a lot of people, especially women who fall into my age group. I probably wouldn't wear 100% camel anything. And it has a little bit of fuzz to it, a little bit of a halo. Nothing like Angora, but a little bit of fuzz to it.
And how is it compared to alpaca? Can you think that it's very similar, or?
In color it is. This is alpaca here. This is some alpaca roving that I just bought this past weekend. And here's the alpaca yarn. Camel has a little more elasticity than alpaca. Alpaca is sort of a slinkier feeling, a silkier feeling fiber than camel. Camel is this fuzzy, downy, fluffy, and camel has a longness to it, a silkiness, a sleekness to it, which is part of alpacas. Sometimes if you knit something out of a 100% alpaca yarn, it'll grow over time.
Yeah.
So that's part of that. It's heavy, but it really gives great stitch definition, and alpaca fabrics have lasted for centuries. They found them in Peru, alpaca weaving, and they just last forever. An incredibly durable fiber, and also very soft and very warm.
So if you were making your perfect yarn out of camel or alpaca as a spinner, how would you blend it, and how many plies would you put in it? And would you do a lot of twist or not so much twist?
Well, I would do them differently. The two of them. Alpaca, I would put more twist in to help with elasticity. More twist makes a yarn a little more elastic. I would blend it with wool at even up to 50%. I've seen some yarns at 50%, but I would probably stay 25 or less with the alpaca, with a tighter twist to really take advantage of the sleekness of alpaca, and the wool will help it bounce back and have a little bit of elasticity. So the alpaca would have a tighter twist. It would have great stitch definition. The camel, I would use in probably a 20% blend with a wool, maybe a 20% with merino. That would be luscious. And it takes dye wonderfully with this brown undercoat. Dyeing it a plum color would be incredible.
Yeah.
I would spin it with a lighter hand that I would spin alpaca so that it can fluff up. I would probably spin it with a woolen draft, more like shelter yarn, like the Brooklyn Tweed shelter yarn, than a sleek, smooth draft, which is a worsted draft, to allow the yarn to plump up, and a lighter twist all around in ply and in the singles.
That's so cool listening to you talk like that. It's like listening to a chef talking about putting a recipe together. It really stimulates my visualization. I think, oh yeah, that'd be good, and I can feel it, and yeah, that's cool. Okay, so what else have you got there?
I have some bamboo, which is very popular in, I didn't have any white, I have beautiful blue bamboo, which is popular in yarns these days. And it is very, very shiny. That's why people use bamboo a lot and in blends. 100% bamboo yarn doesn't really stand up very well. If you can see, it's kind of saggy compared to the merino, which holds up by herself. The bamboo just doesn't. So it needs a little something to help keep it elastic. People blend it with silk. People blend it with cotton. It's a great fiber for warm weather because it helps to wick and keep you cooler. It's hard to spin. It is very, very slippery. I might have said some words that I couldn't say here while I was spinning this, trying to keep it even. But it is a fascinating fiber. I like to blend it into bats when I make bats, and crazy bats. Have you seen those with locks hanging out of them and art yarns?
Yeah.
It is a great flash of shine because it takes color really wonderfully and shines like almost like no other fiber.
Okay, and would you twist it when you're spinning it, give it a strong twist, or would you ply
Yes.
it in a 2 or a 3 ply? Would that?
I would definitely put more plies in it and have a really, really tight twist. And the last two things I have are 2 different silks. I have Tussa silk, which is this brown silk, wild silk. You can see that it's more matte. And Bombex silk, which is very, very shiny and usually white. And Bombex has a lot more texture to it, and it blends well, but you can also do a yarn quite by itself, and it's really wonderful and light. And Bombex silk is sleek and heavy and shiny and is just gorgeous. This blends and also goes with by itself fine. It has to be spun with a tight twist, and you can use as many plies as you want. Some people spin it like thread, and then they just add plies to get the size that they want. And that's really a successful thing to do with silk.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. Like you, I love wool. That's my favourite fibre, and I'd probably always just pick that if possible. But it's certainly so interesting to know about these other fibres and how they behave, in comparison to wool. So that was really helpful. Thank you. So tell us now a bit about plying, both from a spinner's perspective, but also to educate the non-spinning knitter on how plying will affect their knitting.
Plying is magic. Plying is what makes your yarn do what you want it to as far as stitch patterns. Plying is so exciting to me. When a yarn is spun, you spin a single, which goes it's spun in the right hand direction. And then when you ply it, which is adding 2 or more singles together, you spin that in the left hand direction. And the number of plies you add makes a huge difference to your knitted fabric, especially if you're using types of patterns in your fabric. I have some samples.
And just for the people who might be completely new to knitting and yarn,
Yes.
plies is sort of like how many threads you've twisted together. Is that a good description of what a ply is?
Yes, that's perfect. If you untwist one of your yarns, you'll see that it's made up of a variety of different ones. It might be 2, it might be 3, it might be 16. Some yarns are like thread size individual yarns that are then all twisted together to make a finished yarn. So I have these, which is a cable that I knit out of a single ply, a 2 ply, and a 3 ply yarn. And you can see that there's a big difference to how the cable looks and how the cable stands up. A single ply yarn, the cable just sort of sits flat on the surface. A 2 ply yarn, it lifts up a little bit. You can see some stitch definition. You can see the edges a little. But a 3 ply yarn is really the way to go with a cable. It really makes it look like it's cut out of stone. A 3 ply cable or even more plies really makes texture stand up. So 3 plies. When you have 3 plies, those individual threads push together and they want to stand up. as opposed to a 2-ply yarn, which the 2 plies, it ends up being an oval shape yarn, lay apart. They push apart from each other because of the air that's in between. Where if you have 3, it's like the balance of a stool. They all push together and it makes a rounder yarn, which makes the difference in the edges of the cable and how much your cable stands up.
Okay, so 2-ply is basically flat, so it makes the whole surface flatter, and the 3-ply is totally round, and that's what's giving it that depth.
Yes, and I have a lace pattern here to show the difference between the plies and lace, because in lace you want the holes to stay open. That's the big thing about lace. And using a 2-ply yarn is the best yarn, or a single-ply yarn, because a single-ply yarn stays where you put it when you block it. It behaves very well and the holes stay open. And a 2-ply yarn, because it's an oval shape and those 2 threads are pushing apart from each other, it helps to open, and the yarn rolls away from those holes and it keeps the holes more open in your lace. But with the 3-ply yarn, because the plies all push together and make a round yarn, what I see when I look at a 3-ply lace pattern, the first thing my eye goes to are the decreases. That 3-ply yarn really wants to be a texture. You can still see that it's a lace pattern, but the holes aren't as open because that 3-ply yarn is trying to roll in and close the holes because it wants to be a texture.
Okay. Now, what about bias between 1, 2, and 3-ply? How does it affect a garment? Because we often hear that singles will make a garment twist on the bias more.
It depends on how much twist is in that single. You can spin with less twist and finish it so it balances a little more. It doesn't balance completely, but you can make a singles yarn that does not bias. You should always swatch a single-ply yarn before you decide to knit a garment with it, or you might get, a candy cane effect around your body with that.
Yeah.
But a 2 or a 3-ply yarn don't bias at all. And then there's the amount of twist in a ply. I have a sample here that shows a 2-ply yarn that's spun with a regular amount of twist. It would be a very balanced twist, just a twist, a normal twist that you would see in a yarn at a yarn store. And then I have another one that is a 2-ply with as much twist as you would see in a sock yarn. So it's over twisted. So if you have an over twisted yarn, 2-ply yarn, it starts acting like a 3-ply yarn. You can see in these 2 samples that the 2-ply cable looks cabley, but not really toothy. But the 2-ply with the extra twist to it, the cable starts standing up more. So if you're looking to do a cable and your only option are 2-ply yarns, you might look for one that has extra twist, that it looks like the yarn just looks tighter when you look at it, because that helps with your stitch definition overall.
Can you just say something very quickly about multiple plies? Because in Australia, the typical DK weight was called 8-ply. So why would a yarn be going for, it's a commercial yarn, but why would they be doing 8-ply?
Well, the more plies you put in, the more consistent the yarn is. It becomes perfectly round. When you're spinning, there's a law of diminishing returns. I think it's after 5 plies or 6 plies. It doesn't really show that much. I think with commercial yarns, it's about, I think it's cheaper to spin a whole lot of yarns that are the same size and then use multiple plies to make the size that you want.
Okay.
So I think it's a commercial thing.
Does it have an effect on wear and tear, or does it reduce pilling at all? Is there any advantage that way?
Yes, more plies makes a yarn more durable. When you have, say, a single ply, the yarn's just out there all by herself. She gets all of the abrasion for whatever you knit it into. And the more plies that you have, the more they twist together and the less surface is exposed of each individual ply. But again, it's the law of diminishing returns. I think after 5 plies or so, you've got your yarns pretty well covered. But, more plies means a more durable yarn.
let's just finish off by talking, because I know you're also really knowledgeable on twist and knitting style, and that's a really interesting subject. So what can you say about that?
This is a big one. People love this. It answers a lot of questions for knitters about why their knitting doesn't look exactly like their friends' knitting when they have different knitting styles. So when a yarn is made, I said at the beginning when I was talking about plies, the initial ply is spun to the right and the final ply is spun to the left. So it's counterclockwise, the final ply. And depending on your knitting style, you're adding or subtracting twist to your knitting. I have samples here that show about your knitting style and twist direction of a yarn. When a yarn is made, it's spun to the right and then plied to the left or counterclockwise. I'm a continental knitter, so I pick. So when I wrap the yarn around the needle to make a stitch, it's going around the needle counterclockwise. So I'm adding twist to every stitch that I do. So my swatch is tighter and smaller than this swatch that I did by throwing. And when I throw, I wrap the yarn clockwise around the needle. So each stitch untwists the yarn a little bit, and my swatches and every stitch is a little looser. So you can see that these are the same needle sizes, same number of stitches, but the swatches are quite different sizes, and they feel very different, and the gauge is very different.
Welcome back. I bet a few of you have actually put down your knitting and are looking at your yarn very intensely. Maybe you're pulling the plies apart to see how many plies it's got, or how tight the twist is on every individual ply, or if it's a blend, what the percentages are. It's just amazing to have all of this knowledge, because you'll never look at yarn in the same way again. It's never just going to be a squishy ball with a pretty colour.
Yeah, part 2 of that interview is coming up later in the show, so there's still heaps of fantastic information on yarn structure and construction coming up. Right now, I wanted to remind you about the knit-alongs that we've got running at the moment, and just in case you're a little bit puzzled, CAL is just an abbreviation for knit-along that a lot of people use. So we've got 3 knit-alongs on at the moment. We're going to show you some of the wonderful finished projects from those knit-alongs to inspire you either to continue with the projects that you've started, or if you haven't yet joined in, to enter into one of the knit-alongs. There is still some time yet left.
Yeah.
You can find all of the details about our knit-alongs in the Fruity Knitting Ravelry group.
So in our last episode, we interviewed Woolly Wormhead, who is the fantastic hat designer, and we started a CAL where you can enter any one of her hat designs, and she's got over 100 hat designs published. So both Andrew and I are going to join you in this knit-along. And Andrew is going to knit a great design in this very saturated skein from Countess Ablaze. You're going to look gorgeous in it.
Oh, that's terrific. I think it's going to match this jumper too, Dales.
Yeah, it's really your colours.
Perfect.
So that's a fingering weight. So his project's going to be in fingering weight.
It looks very fine.
Yeah, I just thought that then. Oh dear, I should have given you a DK weight project.
Yeah, no, I noticed that before.
But you picked the design because you really like it. But we're not going to tell you about it till he's finished his tiger. So. And I am going to knit Katara, which is from Woolly's Elemental collection, and I'm going to do it in this Countess Ablaze DK weight yarn, which is a blend of blue-faced Leicester and mushroom. And I'm so surprised how soft it is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very soft.
I haven't knitted with a lot of blue-faced Leicester before.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, and my contrast colour is from leftover yarn. That is from a jumper that I knitted you. It's Alice Starmore, her Hebridean 2-ply. So it is a fingering weight yarn, but I've got enough that I can hold it double, so it will be like a DK. And for this pattern, you just need a contrast yarn that's going to do some squiggles. and in a very saturated colour, and I think that should work well.
Yeah.
You're not sure.
I can't quite picture it, but I'm open to, being shown.
It's going to be cool because this yarn is variegated and you do short rows, which means you get nice pooling and funny sort of patterning effects. And then this is like a strong colour that sort of separates that.
Yep.
And so I'll be really excited about trying some of the techniques that Woolie's got in her hat designs.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but obviously I'll be able to say a lot more when I've actually started the project. And back in episode 72, we interviewed Martin Story, and Martin Story is one of the most talented and prolific knitwear designers of our times. And he is best known for his cable designs. Well, we started a knit along to celebrate his work in a way, or get you to introduce you to him if you didn't know him. And he's done a ton of designs. So that cowl is going to finish on May 31st. So if you are a fast knitter, there's still plenty of time for you to jump in and do something and complete it in that time. But right now, we just want to show you a few projects that have already been finished in that cowl. First, we want to show you Julie's project, who is Niekro on Ravelry. Julie has knitted Mistral using the Rowan Summerlight DK, and it looks totally stunning in that amazing yellow colour. And next up is a really simple but stunning design called Skylark, and this is Zelinsky's project. She's knitted it in the Rowan Moordale yarn, and I just love the simple cropped shaping and the really elegant cables on the hem and the cuff. I think it looks really fantastic in that natural coloured yarn. And we also really have to show you this gorgeous little girl's dress with the little mice on the hem. It's so adorable. So this is Olia's project. Sorry, I'm probably going to say a lot of names wrong, so please forgive me. Olia, and the design is called Sophie Tunic. And while we're on children's clothes, we are so excited to see that Amelia, who is Amelia Bedelia 02 on Ravelry, has already finished the tiger design that Andrew's working on. Amelia has knitted it for her son. It just looks amazing. It's so cute and it fits him really beautifully. So that was really cool to see. It was a good inspiration for you, Andrew.
Set a very high standard there.
Absolutely. And her tiger face looks really neat.
Yeah.
No puckering. And one last project that's just been finished is the Hiker, knitted by Knit7 Pearl 8. And she's done a really beautiful job on the finishing. So congratulations, everyone. There's lots more fantastic projects being knitted in that cowl. That was just a small selection. We're also running a Crochet Along, and that was inspired by our interview with Jane Crowford back in episode 71. Janie Crow, who she's well known as, is a UK crochet designer who is incredibly talented. If you don't know her work, you definitely have to go and check her out. This cowl is a year-long cowl, so it's open for beginners and advanced crocheters. You can start off with a very basic project and then progress to more difficult ones, or you can be crazy like me and be a beginner crocheter and just jump in with an atrociously difficult one to start off with.
Yeah.
So I am actually tackling the Bohemian Blooms blanket by Janie Crow, and she did tell me that I will hate her because the first part of this blanket is the most tedious, and you have to knit 4 of these very long stripes, and I've done 3, completed 3, and I've almost completed 4, so I'm super excited about getting past this tedious stage. And Andrew must have been very good at Where's Wally when he was younger, because
Wally wasn't there when I was young.
Wasn't he?
I don't think so.
Are you that old?
I think so.
Because he's just picked out a mistake. Can you believe it?
Little design feature, a modification
So
from Andrea.
where is it? Can you see it?
Where is it?
Your eyes picked it up immediately. I didn't even know I did it. Yeah, can you see that? So I just got the 2 brown colours muddled up in that panel.
Yeah, apart from the fact that they're grey, darling.
They're beige. Beige.
Oh, well.
Okay. Well, actually, the colours are called mushroom and steel. Okay. Can you believe his eyes? He said it stuck out like dogs, something or others. And anyway, I can't believe you picked that out. But I'm really proud of them because I've finally finished 3 of them.
You'll have to pick that back, won't you?
No, I won't be. I won't be doing that. Hopefully Jane won't watch this episode and we won't point it out again.
Yeah. Hey, listen, you said it was really difficult. I have to point out Jane's projects are designed so that you do the easy bits first and you develop your skills as you progress.
This isn't difficult, it's just tedious.
Yeah.
It's just tedious. But look, I've nearly finished the 4th panel, so I'm really excited about that. But right now we're going to show you just a selection of some of the projects that have been entered into this card. Emma, who is Knitting Moomin, has crocheted this gorgeous penguin rag doll, and she's also done some very sweet little bumblebees. And then there's a lovely rug from Sornahan with some braiding in the centre, and she's also got a little bit of that braiding around the edge, and it's a really striking rug. I think it might even be a floor rug. And then there's Cleo, who we featured in an earlier episode in our Knitters of the World segment, and she's already finished 2 beautiful crochet tops. One by Marie Wallen called Asta, and the other called Water Clover by Isa Caterpillar. And finally, this very unique project, Bethany, who is Singer02, has crocheted toe guards for her roller skates.
Yeah, well, I have to say, crocheted toe guards are for your roller skates are another first on Fruity Knitting, so
Yes.
Congratulations for that. So for everyone, keep working on your projects. I'm working on my Martin story here, so I'm in there. Right now, it's time to meet Asia in Knitters of the World.
And I'm a Polish knitter, blogger and a knitwear designer. I've been knitting on and off since I remember, but knitting took over my life when I moved to live in Germany over 10 years ago. At first, I was rather shy about sharing my projects with the rest of the world, as I was knitting mostly in isolation. But when I discovered knitting machines, I really wanted to share this craft with the Polish knitting community. And I started blogging about machine knitting. And what started as a blog about machine knitting quickly evolved into blogging about knitting in general. In 2013, I purchased my very first hand-dyed yarns, and I felt intimidated by it, but I really wanted to create something on my own. And I made my street trick pullover, which few months later became a knitting pattern. It was so kindly received by my readers that I felt incredibly encouraged to continue experiment in creating my own garments. It is rather hard for me to describe my personal style preference, but what I really like to do whenever I knit is to create a wearable garment that has this small detail that makes it mine. I very often start designing process with one single question. What if I choose this particular stitch pattern? What are the consequences of this construction? And this question very often opens a new ways for me to create my own garments and somehow challenges me to explore and experiment while I'm knitting. The inspiration that stands behind my garments very often comes from an architecture, and this top-down circular yoke cardigan I called Rosette is inspired by the Rosette windows so often used in the medieval architecture. The beautiful shape of a perfectly balanced, radial balanced graphic is exactly the image I wanted to incorporate in this design. Rosette Cardigan is designed for a fingering weight yarn, and it's seamlessly worked top down. It incorporates raglan sleeve shaping combined with short rows and a subtle waist shaping. The yarn I used in this sample was a beautiful, luxurious blend of merino, yak and silk, which I believe is an amazing gold-looking, beautiful yellow tone. Nellissimo is a triangular shawl I designed last year. It's worked in a beautiful, reversible ribbed pattern with twists. I knit my sample in Alpaca plus DK by Kulana, which is an amazing and luxurious blend of alpaca, cashmere and silk. The shawl is worked from side to side, and although it may look like it, it doesn't require working with cable needle. All these beautiful twists are created only using increases and decreases. The second part of the shawl requires working with short rows. So as long as you are not afraid of using short rows in your garments and you are enjoying knitting ribbed pattern, I recommend this pattern for you. Don't feel discouraged by this large size of the garment I'm showing you. Pattern for Nellissimo has 5 sizes to choose from, so you can easily adapt your garment to the yardage you're having. Whenever I have the chance to work with a new yarn to me, what I really like to do is to concentrate on a story I believe each yarn wants to share. And when I received this beautiful green colorway called Jaded, hand-dyed by Martin Slap, I really wanted to create a casual looking garment with an asymmetric, messy kind of front panel. This sweater is worked entirely bottom up, seamlessly. Once you reach the armhole length, both in sleeves and the body, they are all worked in the round together to create this beautiful cable looking sleeve shaping. But the right side of the sweater is not the only attractive here. Let me show you how it looks like on the wrong side. And here you have it. This is the wrong side of the same sweater, which I called the no-row sweater. The panel in the front of the sweater doesn't require working with cable needle. These are only increases and decreases that create this beautiful cable-looking twist all over the ribbed pattern. Whitegrass is a circular yoke pullover I designed over a year ago. It's inspired by the nature I am surrounded with. It starts with a provisional cast on, and the upper part of the yoke is worked bottom up in a colorwork pattern. Once you reach the neckband, you may either finish it with a narrow neckband like presented on this sample, or knit a turtleneck cowl like the one I am wearing. The rest of the body is worked top down, and it includes basic raglan sleeve shaping combined with short rows and a subtle waist shaping just to add a little bit more comfortable fit. I would recommend knitting a whitegrass to any beginner knitter who is open to challenges.
We hope you enjoyed meeting Azja, and some of you might have recognized Chopin's piano music at the end. Chopin is a fellow countryman of Azja, being a Polish composer from the Romantic period, but I think that particular piece of music also reflected something of Azja's personality, and I really enjoy doing that whenever possible, matching the music to the maker.
Yeah.
You were very lucky to see an early peek at two of Asia's designs that haven't yet been published, and that was the No Rules sweater and the very beautiful Rosette cardigan. So the patterns for those patterns for those designs, I was going to say the patterns for those patterns, should be coming out sometime during the summer months. And Asia is offering Fruity Knitting patrons a generous 30% discount off all her self-published patterns. Asia has around 38 designs to choose from, so lots of garments and shawls and even a few hats. And when the No Rules sweater and the Rosette cardigan patterns come out during the summer months, Asia is kindly going to offer Fruity Knitting patrons a 30% discount off those two patterns as well for a limited time. So thank you very much, Asia.
Way back in episode 52, which came out in April, just on a year ago, we interviewed Emma Boyles from the Little Grey Sheep, actually in person at her farm in Hampshire. Emma has one of the largest flocks of Gotland sheep in the UK, and with the help of her shepherdess Susie, she breeds them to produce beautiful yarns, which she also hand dyes herself. Emma is now offering Fruity Knitting patrons a 15% discount off all of her yarns.
And you might have even met Emma if you've been to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. She's been there almost every year, I think, and she also regularly attends other yarn festivals in the UK and throughout Europe. So thank you very much to Emma as well.
For a few months now, we've been talking about me joining Andrea full-time in the production of this show, and the reason for this is very simply that it is far more work than one person can do alone. I am really excited and pleased to announce that I have now handed in my notice at my day job, and I'll be stopping that work soon. This is a really huge step for us. It's very scary, I have to say, but I am also really excited to be doing it. And it is really clear that we need to take this step if we're going to continue to produce this show in the quality that we do, and also probably in particular in the frequency that we do. I am really excited to be doing it.
I'm really hanging out for you to join me.
Yeah.
So it's particularly important to point out to you that, or remind you that this is our product. We are not earning an income from doing anything else or selling anything else. We don't sell patterns or yarn, and we don't have sponsorship or advertising money supporting us. So if you are watching, we do really need your support as a patron. So please do take the time to go to the Patreon page and become a patron. Thank you. Yeah,
and to everyone who has shown faith in us and has taken action on the enjoyment that they get out of the program by supporting us financially and getting us this far, a really big thank you from my side as well.
Absolutely. So coming up now is the second part of our interview with Jillian Moreno, and straight after that you're going to meet 4 very interesting vendors who we had the privilege of interviewing back at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival in March. And then we're going to say goodbye now, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about finishing a yarn, because spinners know all about this process or stage in yarn production, and knitters probably have, or a lot of them have, no idea of this stage. And there's a lot of different ways of doing it. They've got fantastic names like menacing and whacking and fulling and snapping. It all sounds very exciting. So I'd like you to just talk a little bit about this process and also give us a demonstration of a couple of these techniques.
All right, finishing yarn is so much fun. It's something that knitters don't get to do, though it is similar to blocking your knitting. Just like blocking knitting, we put our finished yarn all skeined up in a bowl in warm water with some soak, and we let it sit for a while, roll it out into a towel so it's damp, but then we get to do the final part of our finishing. And what finishing does, other than is fun, is it helps the ply twist move around the yarn so our yarns are a little more consistent. Not many spinners are 100% consistent when they spin and ply their yarn, and this just helps even everything out. The first way to finish yarn is to snap it. You put your hands inside your skein and just do this. You get glasses cleaning out of it also because it sprays your glasses. Move your hands around. Do it again. Move it again. And believe it or not, this is a gentle way to finish yarn. It moves the twist around, but it doesn't disturb the surface of your yarn. So a tender yarn or a yarn that you don't want fuzzy, you would snap it. Another way to finish yarn where you do want the surface disturbed and it starts to full yarn a little bit is whacking. This is something for a merino or a very durable yarn where you want it to be fuzzy, or angora where you want to raise the fuzz on the yarn right away, or you want it to just pull in and be a little more stable. Sometimes I do this with singles yarns or woolen spun yarns just to give it a little more integrity. And what you do when you whack is you take your skein, and you're gonna have to pretend like this bowl is the edge of my counter, and you hit it like this, and you move it around, and you do it again.
That's extremely therapeutic, I can see.
It is. It is great fun. It's great when you're in a bad mood.
But tell me, how, you can't get carried away with that, I'm sure. How many times would you do it? What's typical? Like a minute? Or
just 4 or 5 times. And some people do it, if I want a yarn very fuzzy, I'll do it on the sidewalk outside. So, you know, the concrete of a sidewalk will help bring the fuzz up on a yarn. Most yarns are, you know, really durable. They're not going to break. And certainly you wouldn't choose, you know, a sensitive or tender yarn to whack like that. Another great way to finish yarn is to full it a little. And this is when you want some stability in your yarn, or you're doing it for an effect. And what you do is the things that you never want to do with a hand-knitted sweater is that you move your yarn from hot to cold water, and you add agitation. I know, you do it on purpose. And Judith McKenzie came up with the idea of using a sink plunger on your yarn. That's how much agitation you use. And this is the type of finishing that I call menacing, because you're just beating up your yarn in the water, and then you move it to cold water, even with ice cubes in it, and you do the same thing. You're beating it with the sink plunger, and it draws in the yarn so that it starts to felt, and it makes a very, very stable yarn.
Wow.
And it's fun, and makes a huge mess.
Isn't that amazing? Because most knitters would be having a heart attack about that, but that is really interesting.
Absolutely. Don't do that with your sweaters.
Okay, so getting into more technical detail, because you are absolutely the person to answer all these questions. Grist is a new word and concept for me, totally new concept. So what is grist, and how is it helpful to a spinner and a knitter?
Grist is the density of your yarn. How much fiber is in a measurement of yarn. When you're a spinner, it's expressed in yards per pound, or YPP, and we use something called a yards to yarn balance to measure it. It's something we've borrowed from weavers. Grist is important because, say I'm making an Aran sweater, and I know that I want it to have good stitch definition, but I don't want it to be very heavy. And spinners have a way and the control over the whole building of their yarn. We can choose the fiber, we can choose the preparation, the draft, the ply, the finish. All of those things have something to do with grist, and they affect the grist of the yarn. So a cable needs a number of plies, or a tighter ply twist, to have good stitch definition, but I want a lighter sweater. So I might choose a fiber that is, say, a merino or a Corriedale, which is lighter than, say, a blue-faced Leicester, which is a fiber that I love very much, but is quite heavy. So that would change the grist of the yarn for my sweater. And I could get it to where sometimes I've been able to affect a sweater's weight by as much as 1/2 pound by changing the grist of the sweater. For a knitter, it's important when you're choosing a yarn for a sweater or substituting for a sweater. So if you are going to make Andrea Mowry's sweater, The Weekender, it calls for Brooklyn tweed Shelter, which is a woolen spun yarn and very, very light. Say your size used about 1,000 yards is what you needed. In Shelter, that weighs about 12 ounces. And so you couldn't get Shelter, or you didn't want Shelter, they didn't have the colors you wanted, or you were 100% in love with Barocco alpaca yarn.
Yeah.
So that they have such beautiful heathered colors in that yarn. So the same yardage of the Barocco yarn weighs about 6 to 7 ounces more than the Shelter. So it's quite a bit heavier, and it may not seem much in a smaller size, but if you were making my size sweater, comparing the Shelter to the Barocco alpaca yarn, it is more than half a pound difference. So it would be a very, very heavy sweater. So that's Grist.
Okay, very important. I can see that. Okay, one last technical question just for you. Why do some yarns shift gauge easily and others don't?
There are yarns that you can knit at 3.5 stitches per inch, even though the ball band says that they are to be knit at 5 stitches per inch. And everybody knows that ball bands are just a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
So a gauge shifting yarn is one that, because of the fiber used or the way it's spun, it remains stable at a bigger gauge than what the ball band calls for. If you think of a Lopi yarn, that's a perfect commercial example. You know, the ball band may call for 6 stitches to the inch, but you can easily knit it at 3.5 or even 3 stitches to the inch. Like the Mary Jane Mucklestone Stopover sweater is a Lopi yarn knit at a much bigger gauge than the ball band calls for, because of the fiber used and the preparation used and the spinning style that they did. There's a lot more air in those yarns, so they still have structure when they're knit at a bigger gauge. You might be able to see through them, but they won't droop. A merino yarn that is knit at a bigger gauge just kind of falls apart as far as the hand and structure of knitted fabric. Whereas an Icelandic, because it's a springy style of wool and it's knit in a woolen style, spun in a woolen style, it has air and structure still.
Okay, so in a nutshell, you could say that worsted spun yarns are less likely, you can be less adventurous with them by changing their gauge dramatically. You have to kind of stick closer to what's recommended, but woolen spun yarns, you've got more leeway to play around with the gauge. Could you say that?
Yes, that's true. It depends on the breed, but there are a few breeds that could go with a worsted spun yarn, but that is a great rule of thumb.
Okay, well, that's been so fascinating. It's been so great to have your expertise on the show. It's a real treat and pleasure, and I'm hugely grateful. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a blast. I love to talk about yarn.
You sure do, and we love to listen, so that's brilliant. And you've told us heaps, so that's fantastic. So let's just say goodbye to the audience. Bye.
Bye.
I'm here with Astrid. Astrid is a designer and she also has her own yarn brand, Biche et Bûche. And it sounds very French, but she's going to tell us in a minute what it means. And her company is based in France, but she's actually got a Scandinavian heritage. So, Astrid, tell us a little bit about your designing, about the yarn that you're producing or that you've developed to go together with your design. And first of all, start off with the name. What's the name?
Well, our company is called Biche et Bûche, and it translates into deer and logs in English, in fact. It's just a funny name. And yes, we have our studio in the south of Burgundy in France and in an old farmhouse. And we are just in the middle of nature, and this is one of the places where I find a lot of inspiration with the colors that change for every season. And I just look out of the windows and I see the animals and I see the beautiful landscape, and so that's very inspiring.
So that's also a connection to the name as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And you also work closely with your daughters. Tell me what they do.
Yes, in fact, I design some models, and then one of our daughters, she's a trained photographer. So when she finished her studies, she started to take photos, and then we were able to develop more professionally as a brand.
So show us now some of the yarns and tell us what you wanted in your own yarn brand.
Yes, in fact, I have a Scandinavian background and with a Norwegian father and a Danish mother. And in the beginning, I wanted something more Norwegian. But in fact, I thought that the Norwegian yarn was a bit scratchy. So I tried to find something a bit similar with a lot of colors. That's very important. And I found this lovely Scottish yarn, which is pure lamb's wool. We have more than 30 colors, so it's really easy to find a color combination that's really nice.
Yeah, that's good. And I noticed that a lot of the colors look very muted and sort of soft, subtle tones. Is that deliberate?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And is it mainly fingering weight, or what weights do you have?
Yes, we have a lamb's wool, pure lamb's wool in fingering weights. And then we have a cashmere and lamb's wool in fingering weight as well, so they can just substitute for each other. Then we have an Aran weight. It's the same yarn, it's just thicker. It's like for this sweater, for example. So that's really nice. And I also like that we have the same colors in different yarn weights.
So behind us is some of Astrid's designs, and she's now just going to quickly show us a couple of them. They're really beautiful. I've picked out the first one because it's in one of my favourite colours. So tell us about this design.
Yes, this is our sweater number 1. It's quite typical for my designs. It's quite large, and it's rather easy to knit. We have a small portion of stranded knitting, and then the rest is just a slip stitch pattern, so it is quite easy to make. So this is our shawl number 30. It's very colorful, and it's made of slip stitches as well, which forms a kind of mosaic. So I think it's quite funny to knit.
It's very beautiful, and colour work with mosaic is so easy that it's a really great kind of design for a beginner, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
And this is your first time as a vendor at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We are very excited about it.
Great. Okay, well, I wish you a really great few days here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
This is the Gartner booth. It's a really, really interesting yarn company. It's a family company, and I'm talking now to Johnny. It's mainly run by Johnny and his mum, Sally, and they started this organic yarn company from their own flock of sheep, which is in the southwest of Wales, isn't it? So tell us a little bit about how the company started, how you became organic, and how it's grown, and all about your yarn breeds that you've got.
So originally it started because Mum wanted her own yarn, so which is the perfect reason, just been exactly what you want. Originally it was just with wool from our own flock, then that quite quickly outgrew our small flock, which is only about 50 or so. We now buy in directly from other organic farms all over the UK. So working directly with farmers, it means we're able to pay them a fair price for the wool, and it means that we're able to keep all the breeds separate, and also means that everything's fully traceable as well.
And you've got 20 different sheep breeds, and they're all yarn or breed-specific yarns, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And we sort of specialise as well with rare breed yarn. So here I've got a North Ronaldsay, a Llanwenog and a Dorset Horns. They're all on the rare breed list, and they all have very different characteristics.
Okay, this is a Welsh one, Llanwenog.
Yes.
What's the tell me a little bit about that breed of sheep.
So it's a down breed, which means that it has quite a short and bouncy fibre. And what it means, so this one's spun to a double knit, which means that it just makes a really bouncy, warm fibre and yarn because it traps all that air. Yeah.
Okay, and what about these two? Just give us a bit of a rundown on the breed.
So Dorset Horn again is a down breed, so again it traps all that air. This one's even more unusual that it's a coloured Dorset Horn. The vast majority of them are white, and there's not that many white ones, so let alone the coloured. Then we have North Ronaldsay, which is a two-coated breed. We've decided to keep both coats in here. A lot of people will comb out the guard hairs, so it's quite a coarse one to feel initially, but it softens over time as you use it. And we spun this one to a lace, which again is quite unusual to try and go that fine with such a hairy yarn.
Absolutely. So I can see so many breeds here in front of me, and like I said, all of them are breed specific, but you have actually on a few of the yarns blended two breeds together to get different coloured effects, haven't you? So what were they?
So with these we've got a Hebridean and Manx Lochten, which gives us this nice sort of chocolatey brown, Hebridean being a black breed and Manx Lochten being sort of a mid-brown. They also complement each other really well in the fibre, which is something we have to design into it. Manx Lochten being a very short and bouncy fibre really sort of contrasts with the longer Hebridean to give this sort of bouncy yarn. And another one that we do is a 3-breed marl. So this is Hebridean, Manx Lochten and Llyn, which is another Welsh breed, which gives us this lovely stripy effect. We're really proud of these.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. Okay, so just to show off to the viewers, just tell me a few of these names. What have you got here?
So we've got a lot of Shetland in the lace weight, the number 1. It lends itself really well with the really soft fibres. Then coming through sort of number 2, we've got sort of Manx Lochten, again, as I was saying, the really bouncy fibres. We have Ronas, which is our native Shetland, so Shetland from the Shetland Isles. We've got a lot of Jacob as well. So yeah, we've got a really big range from all over the country.
You've been here as a vendor at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival a few times, haven't you? What is really special for you about the Edinburgh Yarn Festival?
So this is our 3rd Edinburgh Yarn Fest, and at the first one that we did 2 years ago, it was when we first realised really that the reception that we had with the customers was when we realised that we could do this full time. So up until then it had been very much a side enterprise to the farm, whereas now we were able to, it was when we made the leap to the both of us going full time, and it's just gone from strength to strength since then. So
that's super exciting. Okay, well thank you so much for being on Fruity Knitting.
That's quite all right. Thank you very much.
I'm here with Lindsay, who's the border tart. Lindsay, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into dyeing and what kinds of yarns you're dyeing and what you've brought to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival.
Thank you. I had the fantastic good fortune to get to travel to India on a design residency. So we saw everything at absolute rock bottom, where people have nothing but they still produce an amazing range of textiles. And the indigo dyeing is really what struck home with me. And I just fell in love with it. So the indigo process itself, it's unlike acid dyeing, which people may be more familiar with, whereby effectively you put the right amount of dye in a pot and the yarn soaks it all up and you're left with clear water. When you dye with indigo, you start with a pot richly full of indigo. And every time you dye something, it's coming out dripping wet with a lot more dye still held in it than is actually soaked up by the fibre. It also means that every single time you dye something, that dye pot gets paler. So that the trick is really to maximise the use of the dye pot. You're going to get some beautiful dark yarns to start with, but you keep dipping and dipping and dipping, it'll get paler and paler and paler. So one interesting side effect of that is that it's actually very difficult to produce large batches. So I would certainly hold up my hand and say, for me, dyeing sufficient absolutely large batches for people to knit a large garment is generally not possible unless they're prepared to live with the variations that you get.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, you've also got a health interest in this as well, and I've heard that you can make really beautiful yarns out of turmeric, and not only are they beautiful, but they're healthy when they're put next to the skin. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I wanted to carry on exploring, really, and I started reading about what is known as Ayurveda. So Ayurvedic principles have been around for 5,000 years or so. People are accustomed now to appreciating that putting something natural in your body, a spice or whatever, however you take your turmeric, is good for you. But Ayurveda is about actually soaking fabrics or dyeing fabrics with these spices so that when you then wear the clothing, your body takes it topically, it takes it through the skin, and so therefore you can benefit in that way. You're not ingesting anything, but you're taking it in through your skin. So what I have done, the easiest way I thought for people to try this was that I basically produce 2 50-gram skeins, one indigo dyed and one turmeric dyed, and offer them generally as a kit. The easiest thing I think to show is a glove, because so many of us suffer from arthritic hands, or indeed you sprain it, or endlessly twisting yarn skeins can do it to you. But to have a pair of gloves that not only are they going to keep you warm because they're beautiful wool, but actually they may soothe the muscular or the joint ailment as well. I just felt it was worth trying. I can't promise it will work for everybody. Things don't necessarily, but at least it cannot possibly do you any harm.
And I think just the mental comfort is probably going to have a good placebo effect, if anything.
I think you're absolutely right. And so that's a win anyway, isn't it?
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much too.
I'm in the Wensleydale Longwool booth with Kath, and Kath is the owner, and I've heard that the original owner of the Wensleydale Longwool company actually started off the company with her own flock of Wensleydale sheep. Now, that's an interesting breed. It's actually native to where you live. So can you start by just telling us something about the breed?
It was established in 1839. It's a beautiful sheep, long fibre between 20 and 30 centimetres. The micron count is 32 to 34 centimetres. It dyes fabulously and maintains that lustre. It's Kemp-free.
Okay, and this is examples of it here. It just looks like the perfect curly hair.
This is our little cushion, which is just a nod to it. So people seem to love this little bit of Wensleydale when they come and visit us. They take this little bit home with them.
And tell us a little bit about the products that you use, because they're all Wensleydale, 100% Wensleydale Longwool.
We only really deal in Wensleydale wool. So we're starting off with our greasy fleece down at the bottom. We've got our washed locks. Then we've got our combed tops or rovings, so we have black and white Wensleydale. And then we end up with our lovely wools. So we've got the wools in 3 different thicknesses. We've got 4-ply, we've got Aran, and we've got double knitting.
And I can see behind me here, we've got a range of different colours. What did you call that? That's your what range?
That's our Shades of the Dales, we like to call it. A lot of the colours are actually named after local landmarks. For example, the yellow is named after the Buttertubs Pass. And in 2014, when the Tour de France went through the Yorkshire Dales, that was really our nod to the yellow jersey.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, and over here is a really beautiful ferrule design. Is that something that's really new to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival this year?
This jumper is launching. It's called Nonna. It's designed by Helen Connington, who won the Kirsty Allsop Christmas jumper competition this year. It's her first published pattern, so she's really excited about it, as are we. It's 9 colours of 4-ply, so we've got some little kits that we've put together so you're not buying huge quantities of wool. She's also designed a little hat as well to go with it, which is the same pattern, so we're absolutely delighted with this one.
Well, that's fantastic, and I know that there's a lot of people who'll be watching this who'll be very excited to see just a booth only dedicated to one breed of yarn. That's very exciting.
Thank you.